Okay, scientific names. I'm not sure how much you guys did on classification when you were sophomores. So this is just a little bit of a review about why we use a different system for naming every living organism on Earth, and how we go about naming those, so that when you see those Latin or scientific names in your studies, you're going to understand a little bit more about them. Okay? We're also going to talk about classification and how everything's connected, especially in relation to all the evolution stuff we were talking about before. Okay, so scientific names. All right, every species on Earth is given a specific scientific name. Okay? Every species given specific scientific name. Okay? Every living thing. And when a new living thing is discovered, it's given a new name through the series of steps that we're going to talk about in just a second. Okay? This process, okay, of giving every species a scientific name is called binomial nomenclature. Anyone here taking Latin? You took it. Okay, good. You might know more than I do then about this. I've never taken Latin. Therefore, I make a lot of stuff up. Okay? But this is called binomial nomenclature, this process of giving every species a scientific name. And it's really important, okay? Because it allows people to communicate about animals more clearly, okay? Let's paint a picture here, okay? Leah has just been bitten by a poisonous snake. Show some remorse. Show something. Oh, no. Oh, gee, that's so sad. You're making Leah feel terrible right now. I just told you she was dying, and you were all like, Is this in my notes? What do I write down? Leah's just been bitten by a poisonous snake, okay? Leah's rushed to the hospital, and they say, Leah, what did the snake look like? And Leah was like, oh, it was brown. And so the hospital workers, being doctors, having gone through years and years of medical school, say, of course, she was bitten by the common brown snake. And they administer her the antivenom for a common brown snake. And what happens to Leah? She dies, okay? Because in fact, it wasn't the common brown snake that bit her, because this doctor was from California, where Constrictus articulitis is called the common brown snake. But here in Maine, all right, the actual poisonous snake that we refer to as a common brown snake is Constrictus diviculitis, okay? Yeah, of course, okay? So it allows people to communicate more clearly, and I'll explain that more in a second. But first, looking at your notes, allows people to communicate more clearly. Now, in the case of course, the snake bite, that's probably not realistic because there's only so many poisonous snakes in America, blah, 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 blah. But let's say instead that Autumn has just been accepted into a very prestigious scientific study in the Amazon. Okay, so she travels to the Amazon, and she's working with scientists from all around the world, okay, including one from India. And she sees what she believes to be an indigo bunting. Do you know what an indigo bunting bird is? Can you guess what color it is?
Indigo.
Blue. Very good, okay? Indigo bunting, all right? And in fact, they have an indigo bunting in India, right? But it's not the same species, because India and Maine are very far apart, and even though they both migrate south, what the Indian scientist is calling an indigo bunting is a completely different bird than what Autumn is calling an indigo bunting, because they're just using what's called common names. Could that lead to some confusion? Yes. And you're probably like, who cares, they're birds. But if this were the backbone of Autumn's entire study, she'd want to make sure that she'd seen, or that she was recording exactly what she'd seen, all right? And same with her Indian counterpart, okay? So by having a specific name that is specific only to that species and no other species around the world, okay, that helps scientists communicate more clearly and effectively, all right? I heard this statistic once. There's something like, in fact, I used a brown snake earlier. There's something like 18 different species of snake that are referred to as brown, the brown snake, okay, around the world. Each of those is its own species, each has its own unique characteristics, its own adaptations, everything else. But they're all called the common brown snake. That doesn't do us any good. We need to know their specific scientific names. Okay? And every name is unique. Okay? Every single scientific name is unique. So, why else are we talking about that? I'm sure that so far I've not shared anything grippingly new to you. You all know that we need to have specific names for specific animals. Okay? But there's a little bit more, and the reason I really want to talk about binomial nomenclature in terms of what we're going to be talking about marine science is the way that these organisms get their specific names can immediately tell us something about that organism. Okay? So, besides just being unique and specific, binomial nomenclature can also tell us something about an animal's relationships with other animals. Okay? Now, when I say relationships, what I really mean is evolutionary history. Okay? We don't name in science individual organisms, individual species, after like what other animal that animal reproduced with once. Okay? That would be in human terms, okay? The relationships. Okay? This is evolutionary relationships. Right? For example, we have the polar bear, which you all know about. Okay? Polar bear's Latin name, and if you were doing this officially on a computer, you'd write this in italics. When you handwrite it out, the first word in Latin is always capitalized, and the second is always not capitalized. Should I spell this correctly? There it is. Okay, Ursus maritimus. If you write it out technically, then you want to underline it because you can't italicize it. Right? Ursus maritimus. No, right now. Okay. Polar bear, Ursus maritimus. Okay? This tells us about the polar bear's relationship with other species because of this first part of this word, Ursus. Have you ever heard of the word Ursus before? Any of you ever studied constellations? Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, bears. Don't look like bears. They look like ladles. Yeah, okay. This refers to the genus of this species. Okay, the genus. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second when we talk about classification. Okay? But every scientific name has two parts. The generic epithet and the specific epithet. This is the generic epithet. This is the specific epithet. Okay? Generic does not refer to generalized, like generic sometimes just means plain or general. It means genus. And that's where the generic comes from, genus. So you have the generic, the epithet referring to the genus, and then the epithet referring to the specific species there. So numerous bears that are all closely related evolutionarily, okay, are members of this species, Ursus. Okay? For example, you also have the brown bear or grizzly bear. And they are Ursus arctos. Okay? You have the black bear, which is Ursus americanus.
What does the first one say? Arctus?
Arctos. Yes. Arctos.
Oh,
Okay? Black bear, Ursus americanus. Okay? And so if you were to see these names, if I didn't tell you anything else about these bears, I didn't tell you where they lived, I didn't tell you what they looked like, and you didn't have any common knowledge from growing up in the United States where these are referred to fairly regularly, okay? If I just gave you these names, and in fact in marine science, we're going to see that happen a lot more often. You see a group of fishes where you get only their Latin names, okay? You can learn something about them by looking at what genus they belong to. Brown bears, black bears, and polar bears all belong to the genus Ursus. And that's why their scientific name begins with Ursus. And this tells us that evolutionarily, these are very closely connected. These branched away from a common ancestor relatively quickly. And if you know anything about polar bears, black bears, and brown bears, that makes sense because they actually, in fact, share very many similar adaptations. They share similar features. And in fact, they share oftentimes geographic areas, right? Up in Canada and Alaska, you've got the triumvirate. Black bears, brown bears, polar bears share the same generalized habitat. Okay? Specialized in different ways, however, but still, it makes sense in that evolutionarily they're all related. And in fact, this makes sense. However, if I were to give you then the Latin name of the panda bear, the world's cutest, most ferocious bear, okay? And this one I can never spell. Ailuropoda, Lyroopoda, Melanoceua. Okay. You're on video right now, Mr. Wilson, just so you know this.
Public Downtown Association.
So Mr. Wilson, okay, if you're watching this, is coming in to learn a little bit something about polar bears, panda bears, and black bears.
Who are we talking to?
You're on video.
Am I?
I'm recording. You want to come over and say hi?
Excellent. I
Come
do.
over. Come over. You can't see yourself, but you have to just trust that you're on
can't?
video. This is Mr.
Am I
Wilson.
on here?
You're on here. It's going to be on
Is
YouTube.
this really me?
Yeah.
No.
It really will be.
Get out. Okay, so we have that, 9 o'clock. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, so now we're back to panda bears. Ailuropoda, Melanoceua.
yeah.
Okay? And we know that evolutionarily then, these bears, not as closely related. In fact, that makes sense. We know panda bears live in Asia. They look different. Those cute little masks. You just want to...
No, I
There's a cute little panda bear. And they tear your face off. Hilarious. They're chewing on bamboo. And if you've ever eaten bamboo, it tastes terrible. Okay? So, scientific names tell us something about the organism's evolutionary history, their relationship with other animals. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. But that's not all they can tell us. I know you were thinking, gee, Mr. Renaud, that's really interesting, but why would you make an entire lecture just telling us that? There's more. Okay? Scientific names, scientific,
It's a Euro sign.
yes, names also tell us about, okay? You can also refer to characteristics, distinguishing features, right? Certain types of fish that all belong to the same genus will be broken down in their scientific names according to whether one has a big head spike, whether one has enlarged gills, okay? And these all come from Latin then, and they use the Latin words for either large gill or head spike or whatever it is, okay? So Latin names can also tell us about an organism's characteristics, right? They can also tell them about who discovered them. If you ever want to be immortalized, go discover a new species and name it after yourself. Happens all the time. Okay? Sometimes as well, they are named after other famous people that they match. There's a case where there's some sort of parasitic flea that's named after some guy that another guy didn't like. It was like an insult to him. Okay? Yeah, if you discover them, you can name them. Okay? And sometimes you choose your characteristics. Sometimes named after the people who discover them. Sometimes they're named after the places where they're found. Okay? And sometimes they're also named after their common names. Okay? This happens sometimes if you've had an insect, for example, where you've had an insect that you didn't know was a new species for a long time. It's always referred to by its common name. Sometimes for ease of transition, they will name the, once they determine the genus, the second part will be its common name, basically. Okay? An example of this, right? This right, Ubalina. E-U-B-A-L-A-E-N-A, which means true Bellini. Australis. Okay? Very good. All right, can anyone guess where this particular species of right whale is found? Yes, the southern hemisphere, the southern oceans near Australia. Okay, so this is a common name, southern right whale. Okay, different than, say, the eastern right whale, the northern right whale. Okay, the literal translation of this is southern true baleen. Okay, in Latin, southern true baleen. And true baleen is a genus of whale. And so if we also can look at this, and we saw a bunch of other different whales, we know that they're evolutionary connected. So these Latin names are important because they tell us a lot about the species without doing any research. Okay? And that's why we're going through them so much. For our purposes, occasionally I'll ask you to refer to organisms by their Latin name. In any type of research you do in this class, you will have to include the Latin name of the organism. Okay? Will I expect you to, in your everyday nomenclature, start calling polar bears Ursus maritimus? No, but it would be really cool if you did. That would make me feel really smart. Because if people all around me all the time are like, oh, well, did you hear about this Ursus maritimus that killed this photographer up in Alaska? That sounds really cool, so you should do that. Okay? Questions? Okay, the final thing I want to talk about today, classification. Who remembers the really fun anagram of how we remember all the different steps of classification? It does begin with a K. What does a K stand for?
Kingdom.
Very good. George? Philip. What does Philip stand for? Or what does a P stand for? Phylum. Okay. What's next? Not gave. That's my very excellent mother gave us nachos, which is the planets. Close though. King Philip. I learned it from Mr. Higgins in the 6th grade.
It's come on for goodness sake.
Yes! Very good. King Philip, come on for goodness sake. Okay? And those stand for kingdom, phylum, class.
I learned from Miss Kirk, and she said the kids play cards on Fat Guy's stomach.
Okay. Miss Kirk apparently says kings play cards on fat guy's stomach. That works too. There's lots of different ones. Okay? Class, order, family, genus, species. Okay? So for example, if I were to ask for the full classification of, say, the polar bear, All right, stick with this example. Polar bears belong to kingdom Animalia, which is the animal kingdom. Okay, how many kingdoms are there? All right, kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata. Who knows what phylum that refers to? Chordates. Vertebrates. Chordata, the notochord, the hollow elongated spine, okay, with nerves running through it. Phylum Chordata, vertebrates. Okay, class, this one you know, Mammalia. Order, Carnivora. Family, Ursidae. Genus Ursus, which we already know. And then who remembers what the species actually is? Maritimus. Okay? I won't ask you to do this very often, but however, I may ask you, I think on one of them I mentioned this, one of the research projects. I want to say it's the marine mammal research project. I thought I asked for full classification. Okay? It's not terribly hard. For example, humans would be kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Mammalia. All right? So there's some commonalities that are going to go through here. But all I'm going to ask for you guys to know is just know this. If you remember King Philip, come on, for goodness sake, as I have since I was 11 in 6th grade, you should be all set. Or if you want to remember the kids play cards on fat guy stomachs, that's fine. Or if you want to remember random words, kangaroo, play, chess, on fat guy stomachs, that's fine too, whatever works, okay, whatever works for you. But just know that these disorder. All right? Questions? Yes, Rosie.
Isn't it different for plants? There's like a different
No.
same thing?
Pretty much. Let's not worry about that. You're right. There are some differences, but I don't know them all, so we're not worry about it. Other questions in terms of this?
Yeah.
Okay. Scientific names. We use them. They're important because they clear up questions. They help tell us relationships between different organisms. They can also tell us, oh God.
Whoa.
They also tell us where an organism can be found, some generalized characteristic traits, something about who found them, all right? All those things. So that's why it's important. You're going to, when you do your research on any of these species that we're going to be talking about, you'll find a lot of stuff on this, right? Anything else? All right, that's it. Put your names in your papers, put them in your folder if you want credit for them.